Super Meat Boy is not the first super hard indie platformer to exist for sure, but it will probably always be heralded as one of the more refined and most fun to play titles in the niche subgenre. On the opposite end, Super Meat Boy Forever will probably always be a divisive sequel that brings up the same old arguments over and over again about auto-running, soundtracks, and art styles. The more puzzly levels and the procedural generation of stages definitely weren't for everyone. In the year 2022, it is hard to talk about the Meat Cube without some level of toxic conversation manifesting, and that's really unfortunate. But rest assured, Meat Boy fans of all shapes and sizes, there is one thing we can all unanimously agree on, one thing that we can all point to, knowing that no matter what camp we're in, that this is of frighteningly subpar quality. No, it's not my channel. I am of course talking about the original game that debuted on Newgrounds before its Xbox equivalent, Meat Boy. Lots of really awesome game ideas get their start as a prototype that has an idea so cool or gameplay that's so fun that you cannot wait for the final release. The proof of concept is enough to carry your faith through the game's entire development. If Edmund were to try and pitch me on the idea of Super Meat Boy's eventual release using nothing but the Flash game, I'd have laughed him out of the room. Saying this is a shell of what the full game is an understatement. Visually, there are numerous little imperfections, and sprites in general just have a jagged nature to them you don't see in SMB. There are even resolution problems where maximizing your screen can cause these weird lines to appear in certain tiles, at least in the fan-made map expansion. More on that later. The OST is still fantastic despite the smaller number of tracks and lesser audio quality. To this day, I actually still prefer the forest theme of the Newgrounds version to Super Meat Boy's, though Super Meat Boy's is definitely more fitting for the game. While it is super upbeat and catchy in the Flash release, it gets grating after you listen to it for a while. And since you're going to be doing these areas over and over again to get better at them, you'll slowly start to wish you'd have muted the soundtrack altogether. The Xbox 360 release of Super Meat Boy had tracks that were still fast-paced, but were relaxed enough that they could settle into the background on repeated attempts. Lots of them are actually refined versions of what you hear in this game. Here's the old version of Can O' Salt, which had more of a construction worker feel to it. So why? Why is it so awful? What did its full game counterpart ultimately achieve that the Newgrounds release just couldn't hope to? Well, there are multiple issues with Meat Boy, some of which won't immediately be noticeable, but I promise you'll be familiar with them soon enough. The physics are absolutely terrible. Gone is the tight, acrobatic moveset and jumping capabilities from Super Meat Boy. Super Meat Boy Forever might not be your favorite entry in the franchise, but I promise you that after accidentally running off a platform multiple times because of the awful weight to your character, you'll be longing for running to be automatic. Meat Boy's controls are about as responsive as YouTube's support. Never mind the fact that there's no pressure-sensitive analog stick input. You cannot turn on a dime. There's a brief moment after you press the opposite direction in which Meat Boy just keeps moving forward before he can change course, which makes precise movement very finicky. To be fair, even in Super Meat Boy you couldn't stop your momentum instantaneously or anything. There was a weight and logic to how he moved. I get that, it makes the overall feel of the character more satisfying to control, but it achieved a balance that felt right. He didn't feel so heavy to control that you had to think half an hour ahead of what you were inputting. Though, if you'd like to play an Edmund game where you can turn instantaneously, I'd recommend his most recent platformer, The End Is Nigh. I also don't think that the more cramped levels help much either. Meat Boy's jump reaches a lot farther than most standard platforming heroes. Having everything confined to this vertical box gives you the weird feeling of never being able to stretch your legs. There's no world map screen between levels, only menus. There are only 3 worlds here from the main game: the forest, Salt Factory, and Hell, though I'd argue the entire game takes place in that last one. Similar to SMB, you can collect bandages to unlock more characters. What's neat though is there's actually some guests here that aren't in Super Meat Boy, like the Blue Castle Crasher. For whatever reason he leaves behind blue paint, like he's supposed to be the Ice Knight, and that doesn't seem like it'd just be water, so who knows really. It's a small addition, but I kind of like these story panels between worlds. They're not full-on cutscenes or anything, sure, but compared to its competition on Newgrounds, little things like this gave Meat Boy more of an attitude and tone than a lot of other platformers you'd see online, and I think that's a huge part of what made it so popular. I'm aware that I've been hard on this game, don't get me wrong, Meat Boy is more complete and feature-rich than most Newgrounds games that exist. I'll go as far as to say it's better than most Flash platformers even. There's unlockable characters, multiple endings, and even a level editor of all things. Content-wise, this was definitely worth refining into the full game we all know today, but the amount of content that's in the game just makes it all the more frustrating that the gameplay isn't fun to begin with. Looking at the dozens of levels not just in Meat Boy, but its Flash level pack equivalent, and realizing that none of them were fun was disheartening to say the least. I do recommend at least giving that fan level pack a look though, because there is an odd charm to seeing the mismatched tile sets, like riding up the Salt Factory's treadmills in the forest for example. But let's pretend you did enjoy the game. Even if you derived enjoyment from Meat Boy's original release, I do not recommend you play it the same way that I did. Some of you can tell from the UI on screen already, I'm sure, but I feel it's worth pointing out that the way I played this was through the Basement Collection, an assortment of different Flash games Edmund created over the years. It has extras, a Macmillan-looking menu, and unlockable games. It is terrible. There's no controller support, extras will bug out and play over the game's audio, and none of the games themselves have better performance than they did on their original releases. It's nice to have all of these titles in one place, especially since you can't play a lot of these just in your browser anymore, but I'm reluctant to call this a celebration of Edmund's works because it feels really dry in its presentation. And to top it all off, the aforementioned fan level pack is not even included in the collection, which I guess isn't a huge deal at the end of the day, considering you could just download it, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not available here. It isn't all bad though. It's nice to check out some of the sketches for each of the games between play sessions. Ed's always been pretty open about how he approaches design and when he conceptualizes stuff. I have mixed feelings about some of the games not being unlocked from the start though, but that's neither here nor there. I'm certainly glad that the first Meat Boy exists. It eventually gave rise to one of the most prominent indie platformers of all time. It crawled so that Super Meat Boy could run, and by extension, so that that game's sequel could run without stopping 10 years later. Since its Xbox counterpart effectively wrote every wrong that the Flash game had, it's hard to feel too upset about it, and it was certainly received better at the time of its release since we didn't have the full game to compare it to anyway. Perhaps in the future we'll get another Meat Boy game so good that it makes even Super Meat Boy look like its own Flash predecessor in comparison. More Meat Boy videos will be coming in the future. Clicking the bell is the only way to make sure that you're up to date on when those come out, since otherwise they can get lost in the algorithm. Huge thanks to my patrons who have helped the channel for a handful of months now. A link to become one yourself is in the pinned comment below the video. For less than a Happy Meal a month, you can help me keep creating videos like this one. There's also a Discord link in the description. We are trying to get to the 500 member mark. It's a very active place. I think you'll really enjoy it. If RPG Maker games are your thing, know that I'll be doing a video of One Shot Switchport when that comes out in about a week. It's actually the very first title I've gotten a review copy of, so it's very exciting, to put it mildly. And if by chance you're still watching this somehow, I'll also let you know that this channel's roots are deeply connected with Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac, so by extension, Edmund Macmillan as well. So if you like Ed's stuff, be sure to subscribe and stick around. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.